of my original notes from my very first lecture that I did over 30 years ago are actually in this book. But by and large, it's an introduction to the public about something that most people, when you try to talk to them about it, and these are people who are dying, people that have all kinds of health issues, and yet you say the word. In fact, when I was up in Sitka, I had gotten some books up there, and one of the people in Sitka, it's about a town of 8,500 people, Sitka, Alaska, and there's a juice bar there. And in the juice bar, the lady that owns it, she's been seeing me, gosh, for about 14 years now, but she bought one of the first copies of the book that I got up there, and so and it's very busy, people are buying juices and so forth, so she sets the book down on the counter, and then one of the people helping her, oh, wow, Dirk, wow, this is a very beautiful book. What's this book about? And I said, well, it's a way to trick people into reading about their colons. And everybody at the juice bar, everything stopped as soon as I said the word colon, okay? Because how many of you here really like to talk about your colon? Wow, look at everybody's raising their hand. See, 2 people raise their hand. Besides me, of course. I'll talk about my colon, whatever. But in any case, so there you go. And so number 1, an introduction to everyone. And I'm talking about people that come in to see me over the years, and they're suffering. And the suffering has to do with some very basic things about their body. And for whatever reason, and I'm talking about people from all levels of education. I mean, I work with everyone from ditch diggers to dishwashers to engineers, PhDs. I just got done working with a man who has 3 PhDs and knows 10 languages. And he was dying because he didn't know a thing about his colon. And that's what's tragic. And so, an introduction. You're going to learn some things about your colon. Again, you're not going to read anywhere else. Secondly, an introduction into Native American traditions. If you notice the title of the book, Wheels of Wellness, it bespeaks of the fact of a wheel. And I start out in my book talking about the medicine wheel, and I go from there. Throughout this whole book, the book itself is a wheel. And you come back, by the end of it, you come full circle again. And this is a book you can read over and over. And I found that when people come in to see me, because a lot of times nowadays, people's attention spans seem very short. And it's like they need repetition. They need to be told things. And that's where the art comes in, the poetry. There's science in here. But it's all saying the same thing over and over and over. And that is that in our bodies, it's balance. And in the medicine wheel tradition, north, south, east, west, you're looking at mind, body, spirit, emotion. And you're in the center of that wheel. And if you're out of balance, those are the 4 directions that you look to get yourself back into balance. So there's that in there. There's other examples of the wheel. And so that's an introduction to that concept. And then it's also an introduction for people who want to know more on a scientific level. There's a lot of research in here. I have, part of this book is an annotated bibliography of over 70 books, and most of them have to do with various forms of enimata, clyster, various terms of the use of water in the colon. In the very first page that you see, this is the only picture that's not original. However, I got permission from the museum to use this picture, and it's basically a Mayan ritual enema scene. And one of the things about the use of water in the colon is that it has been used for thousands of years You can find examples of it in the New World, the Old World. I mean, I have some Cherokee in me. I found examples where the Cherokee used enemas. So you can find examples. So why is that? Well, maybe it's because there's something to this. There's something about it that seems to help people. And that's what part of this book is about too. I have testimonials in here. As Lori said earlier, people, and I'm not kidding you, they've been seen at every specialist you can think of. They've spent hundreds of thousands of dollars in some cases on all kinds of treatments, and they've been cut and burnt and poisoned and all kinds of other things going on. But the fact is I've seen those people recover. And for me, this book, in terms of a burden, and this is the biggest part for me about this book, is that when I first started learning colon hydrotherapy many years ago, it was kind of I just wanted to know a little more about the body. I never imagined myself doing it now for over 33 years, okay? Looking back on all of it. But when I first started working with it, I was very intrigued by it. And I would watch certain kinds of responses that one person would get, but yet another person would come in and they wouldn't get those responses. And I'd scratch in my head. And that first year, the first medical doctor came to me for colonics. And at the time, I was working with the first instrument I ever learned on, which is an old Holmes instrument. At this point, I'd worked with 12 different types of instruments and many types of techniques. But basically, it's one of these very large, mounted on the wall instruments, and with certain sets of techniques. And so, when the receptionist told me, "Dirk, you've got a medical doctor coming in to see you," and of course, at the time, I was immediately intimidated because I'm thinking, "Well, why does this person want to come in?" So he comes in, and to this day, the usual question is, "Well, why have you decided to work with something like this for your health?" And he said, "Well, Dirk, my yoga instructor told me to do 10 colonics, and that's why I'm here." So during the course of working with him, very smart man, he would ask me as things would be coming out, and how many of you here have done some type of colonic at some point? Okay, so most of you are familiar that there's usually a lit area of the tube where you can see what's coming out. And so he would be coming in, and he'd say, "Well, Dirk, what's that?" And I go, "I don't know." And then he would go, "Oh, well, what's that?" And I go, "I don't know." And after a while, I realized that, I could read, like, you didn't chew your apples very well on that one. I could tell that one, okay? But some of the other things that were going on, and the person that I learned from, she couldn't give me any answers. She was a retired nurse, and she had done colonic a certain way. She got trained a certain way, and that's how she did it. And she says, "Oh, Dirk, it's just a load of crap. Don't worry about it. What do you want to know for?" And all this stuff. And of course, I don't want to just sit around and watch poop all day long. I've got to have a purpose to it. So after a while, so the doctor finishes his 10, and he goes, "Well, Dirk, I just have to say, whatever you did with this, I feel really good." And I said, "Well, are you going to do any more?" He goes, "No, my yoga instructor told me to do 10. That's the end of that story, right? And so, but in the meantime, I thought, okay, I got to find some answers here. So I started digging for information. And in fact, the gentleman was just here. He was talking about Bernard Jensen. How many of you here are familiar with Bernard Jensen? Okay, and there's Norman Walker. How about Norman Walker? Okay. And then Edgar Casey. What about Edgar Casey? So some of those are, back in the 90s, or actually, in the 80s, I guess. Oh my gosh, it was March of '81 when I got into this. But in the 80s, some of those authors were still fairly popular, and they would talk about different types of colonics or enemas. So I started getting a little information there, but it still wasn't, I still couldn't get certain answers. So over a period of time, I found some books, and that's part of what you're going to see in over 72 annotated bibliography books from all kinds of specialists. And these were back from around the turn of the century is when you had what was called the first return flow system. And that's where the hydrotoning comes in, which is different from doing an enema, and so forth and so on. So I started finding a book here, a book there, and eventually I was able to obtain all of the books. Every book, every trail I followed. And then, as Lori mentioned earlier, I went through a transition in my life where I went back to school, and so and I went to Evergreen. I'm a go Gooey Ducks. Any Evergreeners here? Yay, Gooey Ducks. Okay, so there you go. But part of the reason why I decided to go to Evergreen was because there was one of the two schools at the time where you could write about your life experience. And you could do it for X number of credits and so forth and so on. And so through the dean and the writing teacher and the third professor, Dr. Betty Cutter, ultimately became the professor who reviewed my work and critically picked it apart. I mean, she was amazing. I went back and wrote things, rewrote things, and rewrote things. And so instead of taking 1 year and 100 pages, it took 2 years and 250 pages. Okay, but the good news about it was that she said, "Prove it, Dirk. What do you mean the colon can do this? Or what are you talking about here?" And so I would go back, and some of it I would find in these old books. Others I found in gastroenterology studies, and you'll see scientific. There's actually about 14 different pictures in this book, and 5 of them are scientific drawings. 4 of them especially. That I found in gastroenterology books that set up the hypothesis of how this works. So over a period of time, the explanations started forming. And the things I was telling people, through that research, through Dr. Cutter, I was able to dig and find the explanation of this, that, or the other. So what you'll see in this book is the result of some of that as well. And so I'm really, as you can tell, excited about this book. And there's other components to it too, but that at least gives you an idea. And so how many of you, because I want to make sure I have enough time, how many of you here are planning to buy one and have me autograph it? Because I just want to allow enough time. Okay, 1, 2, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay, so 8 books. Okay, so
actually, I need 3 books.
Okay, you're going to get 3. Okay, so if there's, but that way I know. Okay, great. Okay, so we'll allow enough time because I think Elizabeth, what time should we try to get to that point? There's about 8 people here, so I should allow a few minutes for each person. So if I allow about a half hour, that should be fine, right?
That should be plenty.
Okay, so what I'd like to do is I'm going to read the last chapter of the book. And then, if you would like me to answer some more questions based on the time factor, and Skyfeather, you're going to be my timekeeper. Okay, so I would like to do a reading out of my book, Wheels of Wellness, an introduction to white heron pie.